Thank you for listening to Shulchanaruchharav.com.
May one whistle or make other musical sounds with one's mouth on Shabbos? So while you may notice that most Yidden do not whistle on Shabbos, there are a few who do, and often they are told off by others that it is forbidden to do so on Shabbos, as so is the common conception amongst Jews, that whistling on Shabbos is forbidden. So let us now delve into the words of the Poskim and what Halacha actually has to say about whistling. We'll begin with the background against playing music on Shabbos. It's brought in the Gemara in Eruvin 104a and recorded in the Rambam and the Shulchanaruch, chapter 338, Halacha 1, that it is forbidden to play musical instruments on Shabbos, rabbinically, due to a decree that one may come to fix the instrument and then transgress the biblical prohibition of metaken man, of tikkun kli, of fixing things on Shabbos. So playing a violin, a guitar, is all rabbinically forbidden, not biblical, due to that one may stumble and come to do a biblical prohibition. Now, from this source alone, all we know is that playing musical instruments are forbidden. But what about making music with your body, such as clapping to a tune or banging on the table, drumming? So then we have another source. The Mishnah in Beitza 36b, and so is recorded in the Shulchan Aruch of the Mechaber and the Alter Rebbe, chapter 339, rule that it is forbidden to make music sound a hymn, a tune, with the use of one's body, such as through dancing or clapping one's hands or banging one's hands against his thigh, as this too is a rabbinical decree, lest one come to, in the haste of making music, to fix a musical instrument. So from all these sources we so far mentioned, it sounds like we're building a case for prohibiting whistling, as you may come to fix a musical instrument when you're enraptured in the enthusiasm of sounding the music, just like we prohibit regarding clapping. However, this deduction is incorrect. In the glosses on the Rif written by the Shulchanaruchharav, he brings in the name of the Riyaz that the prohibition that the sages made against sounding music is only when you're doing an action with your bodily limb or with an instrument. However, to sound music with your mouth was never prohibited by the sages. And this ruling of the Riyaz of the Shulchanaruchharav is recorded in the Ramah, in the Shulchan Aruch, chapter 338, Halacha 1, in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch 338, Halacha 2, and is unanimous without dispute, and therefore it is permitted to sing on Shabbos, and so is the custom of all Klal Yisrael. And no one says that in the Dveikus, ecstasy of your singing, you may come to fix a musical instrument, though no decree was made. Now what about actually whistling? So continues the Riyaz, the Shulchanaruchharav, the Ramah, the Alter Rebbe, that furthermore it's permitted to sound music using one's mouth, even not in the form of singing, but rather similar to the sound of an instrument or the sound of a bird, such as those who call out their friend and whistle like a bird. So an explicit source, it is permitted to whistle like a bird on Shabbos, such as those who want to get their friend's attention and go. Doing so is permitted, and yes, this ruling too is brought unanimously without debate. So everyone agrees you can whistle to someone on Shabbos to get his attention. Now what about whistling to a niggin? Such as the Shalom Aleichem, you'll go. Is that mutter on Shabbos, or is that already too much? So here's already where we get into the murky waters of the halacha. The implication of the wording of the Riyaz, Shulchanaruchharav, and Ramah in Darkei Moshe is that the allowance to whistle on Shabbos is only due to two factors. A, that you're not doing an action with the limbs of your body, other than your lips, and B, that you're not sounding an actual tune, you're just getting someone's attention, which would imply that the sound an actual tune would be forbidden, and so deducts the Magen Avram in 338, Halacha 2, based on the Shulchanaruchharav. However, practically the Magen Avram concludes, unlike this inference, and writes that it's permitted to whistle in any form on Shabbos, even to a niggin, even to a tune, as the sages did not make a decree on the mouth. And thus all vocal music is permitted on Shabbos of all forms. This ruling of the Magen Avram is practically recorded in the Alter Rebbe in chapter 338, Halacha 2 as Halacha L'Maaseh, and so also rules the Pri Megadim, the Machzis HaShekel, the Aruch HaShulchan, who actually writes that this ruling is so obvious that it must be that the Shulchan Aruch is coming to include an even greater ruling, as everyone knows you're allowed to sing with your mouth on Shabbos and whistle with your mouth on Shabbos to a niggun. And so also rules the Mishnah Berurah, and so is likewise accepted amongst the Sfardim, as writes the Machzik Bracha, the Chidah 338 Halacha 1, that so is the custom and the ruling of the Achreinim, and so also I heard in the name of Rav Ovadia Yosef from his son, Rav Yaakov Yosef, that it is permitted to do so on Shabbos without limitation. That is the final halacha, even though, as we said earlier, some argue. Now, what about to make a cappella sounds with your mouth, in which you mimic different musical instruments using your tongue and your mouth and your vocal cords, and you can actually have a whole choir playing on Shabbos in this form? Is that permitted? So the Chidah Machzik Bracha 338.1 further writes that it is permitted to do so and sound musical notes with one's mouth in imitation of a musical instrument. And he says that indeed, based on this was the old age Ashkenazi custom, to sound music using their mouths and make sounds identical to actual musical instruments. To the bystander, it would sound like an actual band is playing. So writes the Chidah. And he continues that this was done even by holy rabbis and chassidim of Ashkenaz. And thus, indeed, we find that the Rebbe would motion to people on Shabbos during the Farbrengens to whistle. And therefore, to summarize halacha l'maaseh, it is absolutely 100% permitted to whistle on Shabbos, and the halacha and minhag is that it's permitted to whistle even to a tune. And this is followed and practiced both by Ashkenazim and Sfardim, and is a very old age custom, as testifies the Chidah. And those who tell people otherwise are just simply unaware of the halacha and of the old age minhag. Now, what about placing your fingers in your mouth and whistling with the help of your fingers? So here it's already a little tricky, as here you're using a limb, your hand, to do the music. And we already said everyone agrees using your hand is forbidden. So the simple implication of the poskim would be that it's forbidden to do so. However, the Aruch HaShulchan discusses this in length in 338 halacha 7 through 8, and he concludes that it's mutter. Practically, it's best to avoid doing so on Shabbos. However, if one is simply doing so to make a single sound and not a tune, then one may be lenient. Now, although the Rebbe motioned for people to whistle on Shabbos and he motioned with the fingers, nonetheless, we can't deduce from there to infer that all whistling with fingers is mutter on Shabbos, as perhaps there the whistling was not in the form of a tune but just making a noise. And even if it was in the form of a tune, whistling for a simcha shel mitzvah is accustomed to be lenient, and therefore one shouldn't derive from this that all whistling with your fingers would be allowed. All the above is regarding whistling with your mouth. However, to put an instrument in your mouth, such as a whistle or fork or spoon, and whistle through that is absolutely forbidden according to all, and that is considered klei shir, and never was an allowance given regarding those cases. Merit this Shabbos to see the coming of Mashiach, in which we will act as did David HaMelech with the return of the Aron, Mecharker, Mefarch, Umefazes, Ufnei Hashem, and we will whistle in simcha to the coming of Mashiach.
Thank you for listening to Shulchanaruchharav.com. Our free services of making Torah knowledge available to the public depends on donors like you. Please help us continue our work through making even a small contribution at Shulchanaruchharav.com under the Daily Halacha Dedication section or in the subscription page. Also, check out our online courses and many sefarim available for purchase that will both enhance your Torah knowledge and help support our work.